sheet again. Big opening. Pass 5. Pass 10. Burgos a man. And he goes all the way to the 15-yard line. 17 yards of the carry.
Welcome back to Believe in Badgers on the Believe Network, presented by betonline.ag and Oak Bridge Wealth Management. I'm Matt Perkins, joined as always by Badger legend, the Hebrew Hammer himself, Matt Bernstein. Bernie, how we doing? New dad of 2.
New dad of 2 on leave. Man, life is kind of good. I mean, besides being really tired almost every second of every day and could fall asleep standing up, dude, every day is a holiday. And now being on the podcast, it's good to talk to other adults than my wife.
We love you, Allie. And we also love having our good friend, Jake Kocorowski, back. Jake, as you all know, is the guy when it comes to reporting on the Badgers. And I know he's been on the show probably close to a half dozen times at this point, and we would have him all the time if we could, but he's a very busy man. Badger Extra, everything going on. Jake, great to see you as always, bud.
Great seeing you all too. You guys bring smiles to my face, especially on this cloudy Thursday afternoon here in Madison. And of course, congratulations, Bernie, on another addition to the Bernstein family.
Thank you. But let's not talk about that because I'm immersed in that 23 hours of today. Let's talk about one of our favorite teams, if not our favorite teams, my favorite team, the Badgers. I have a ton of questions, Jake, but I'm going to let Matt Perkins start it off because I know he likes to direct these things and he's really good at it somehow.
I do my best. I do my best, and I do my best to keep our sponsors happy as well. And speaking of that, I want to talk about betonline.ag, your number one source for all of your summer sports this season. MLB, golf, NBA, NHL playoffs. You want it, they've got it over there at BetOnline. Latest stats, news, scores available to follow your favorite teams, no matter where they are in the States or in the world. Get the latest odds and lines, including team matchups, player props, odds on just about every sport, and more. Head on over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Bet online, where the game starts. And our friend Chris Anicetti, Oak Bridge Wealth Management. Are you a professional athlete or going to be a professional athlete? Link up with our guy Chris over at Oak Bridge Wealth Management. That's Oakbridge _Anicetti, ANICETE. Chris Anicetti. Get your money right with him over at Oak Bridge Wealth Management. Jake, speaking of getting your money right, I think that we've got a lot of new faces here on the Badgers, and a lot of people are thinking that these guys are, if we're going to bet on the Badgers, make our money right, because there's been an infusion of talent here this spring through the transfer portal, through early enrollees as well. But Jake, you were at all of the open practices this spring. It wrapped up this past weekend. Let's just start big picture. What's the biggest difference you saw from last spring to this spring?
I think the biggest difference, can I do one for offense, one for defense?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, so first off for offense, I think they even with a new quarterback receiving reps in Tyler Van Dyke, I think the offense looked more comfortable. It's year 2 of Phil Longo's air raid scheme. You're seeing the receivers look more comfortable, make a little bit more plays, and I would argue against better talent on defense. And on top of that, the running game with the first team offense and even second team, you're having the depth there, even with a new transfer running back and Tawee Walker. Chaz Malusi looked good there. And the running game with that first team offense, I think could possibly turn some heads if they all stay healthy. And that's going to be a key for them. I'm sure we'll talk about that later too. But I think even with Tyler Van Dyke, Braden Locke looks so much more comfortable compared to him being a redshirt freshman. And Phil Longo talked about having 2 competent quarterbacks after the scrimmage was April 27th. And so you also seen Tyler Van Dyke got comfortable and he made some plays and he sustained some drives with both the first and second team offenses during the spring too. So I think overall, Phil Longo talked about it. This is like kind of what he was used to at North Carolina in terms of it instead of like year 1 last year, which even, I think a lot of us got caught up in the fact that covered the team of like, hey, this is a whole entirely new offense. And you're seeing guys like, oh, look at that downfield pass. Look at this. And then you realize there's still going to be some growing pains, and that's a mea culpa to everybody in Badger Nation that, we all said like, hey, look at what they did last year, in spring. It didn't necessarily carry over. Now there are a lot of injuries too that helped lead to that as well. But that's a different story. Defense, I just think the biggest difference is the linebacking crew, both inside and outside linebackers. There's a lot of pressure. You didn't even write about it in the observations anymore unless there was someone that stood out in terms of pressures, and like Daryl Peterson, who had a really good spring. But that's because, I think he upped his game because of Leon Lowry Jr. from Syracuse, the FCS All-American, and John Pius putting pressure. First and second team defense is there. You saw even Thomas Heiberger and Anelo Lafayette, the true freshman, against the second team offensive line, make plays. I think that bodes well for the future. I don't know how much they get in this upcoming season outside of maybe special teams, but again, that's still a long ways away. But inside linebacker, arguably the position group that's changed the most with who left either by NFL transfer portal or, additions with transfer portals. Jaheim Thomas, I think, will be a huge factor in this defense just based off of what we saw in the spring. But you also have, Sebastian Cheeks, and you also see, who, got some second team reps. I would say Tacker Curtis, we, barely saw when it comes to 11 on 11 reps in terms of team reps. But I think once he's healthy, you look at the fact that there's a lot of pressure with Jake Chaney and what Christian Allegro can do too. I think this will be a drastically improved defense because of that. So they don't have to keep sending 5 or 6 guys, and just the length and the athleticism, which have been buzzwords since the end of the 2023 regular season. It feels like Pee Wee Herman, where you say, let's see, we're like, like that type of stuff, He's like, sorry. But then you also have, you see the defense changing, and it makes sense with what they're trying to do within Mike Tressel's scheme. So those would be the two that stand out the most to me.
So Jake, you mentioned comfortability. To me, that from last season to this season had to be one of the biggest things they worked. Granted, O-line for pass protection, those things are football things, but the comfort, talk to me about how important that is and how hard it is from when they went through a huge shift last season. And I don't think we give them credit enough to learn not only just a whole new offense and defense, but a whole new program, a whole new coaching staff, a whole new administration, pretty much. You're really relearning everything. So just walk me through that process and how it gets them to being a second year team that has to be more, they will be more comfortable.
Right. I think one thing too is with transitions to what Paul Christ or even Bobby Ingram was trying to run in 22 and before that, talked about being a pro style offense and whatnot. And I'm talking about offense for right now. I'll switch over to defense in a minute, but that's a drastically different, being asked to do different things compared to what Phil Longo was talking about putting athletes in space. And things where you saw, Chimere Dike work in the slot underneath Paul, and then he's working out on the outside underneath Phil. Skylar Bell worked on the outside for Paul's system, worked inside, both in no longer with the program, and whatnot now. But it's you're seeing them just getting used to it and getting used to each other, and it's a different style of football. In terms of Wisconsin will run the ball. That's just part of the traditional Wisconsin. Phil Longo has talked about, Luke Fickell have talked about the importance of the run game. That's not going to go away. It's just how they're going to go about it. And I think, everyone's starting to talk about this balance and whatnot. It takes a while, but you're also working with pieces. I used Chimere and I used Skylar as examples. Sometimes those, I think Chimere could have worked in the slot too, but you have someone like Will Pauling who, his intangibles really work well within that slot receiver position. You're working through those that were in the old system, going to this new system. It takes time. And sometimes maybe those pieces work. Sometimes you can find other pieces that might fit a little bit better, even though those might fit decently at that point too. And I'm not saying that for DK or Bell in particular, I'm just saying in general. And so I think that's key, where you're trying to figure out the skill sets of the players. You want to implement the system, but you're also trying to fit the skill sets of those players and how they can, what you need to do to, it's a transition year. So you're trying to balance what you're trying to run with what the players can do. But on defense, I think that's a perfect example for defense, where certain play, with what they want to run and what they tried to run, you saw the dollar package, with the 6 defensive backs that, they got it didn't necessarily work as well as they would have liked to. Particularly, I would say in the run game, I think against Purdue was kind of like the one thing. I don't know if they ran a lot of dollar in that game, but I know that, I mean, just the run game in general, with what they were trying to do, a lot of nickel, a lot of two defensive linemen as well. But I think what you're seeing with the comfortability of Wisconsin's now, the linebackers, you bring in someone like Jaheim Thomas, who is used to the system because he, signed with Cincinnati when Fickle was there. He worked underneath them for 2-3 years before going to Arkansas. Now, if Jaheim Thomas actually, he visited Wisconsin last year, and let's say he does commit instead of going to Arkansas, where he was tied for fifth in tackles in the conference, I think the defense I think that's in my eyes, it could be something completely different. Maybe not completely different, but they could have done a little bit different things with his skill set and his length on the field. But I think getting the pieces in place, but also, getting guys used to the system. And, you started to see the defensive line, like guys like Ben Barton get used to things. And now he's receiving like first team reps alongside James Thompson Jr. and Kurt Neal. You've seen Kurt Neal starting to progress more and whatnot. And so I think, year two, it's always just, okay, you've been in the system, you know what works, what doesn't, what you're working on. And now you're also getting used to coaches. And that's another thing, getting used to coaching styles and working through things. And so, I mean, you talk about strength and conditioning too, but Wisconsin's strength and conditioning has always been good, but Brady Collins has that extra energy that we've seen through plenty of videos and also his tweets. So I think Wisconsin, like year two, I think the team's going to be better, but also the question is, will the record reflect that is going to be the next thing.
Yeah, Alabama, Oregon, Penn State. It's going to be a lot of interesting and tough games on the schedule. Now, most places we'd start by talking about the quarterbacks, but this is Wisconsin, so we are going to start by talking about offensive line. And, anyone who listened to this show last year, especially Monday Morning Fullback with me and Bernie, knows my consternations with snapping the ball that occurred last year and the light year of time that it took. A light year of time is a year. It took forever to get the ball from the center to the quarterback. And I think it really threw off the timing of the offense. How did the sort of the revamped interior of the line look to you in practice, and just sort of the line in general? Because, like I said, like that was one of my big consternations last year was poor offensive line play. So what'd you see this spring that either gives you hope or gives you reason for concern?
There's a little bit of both. Let's start off with the latter just to get that one out of the way. The depth is something that needs to be talked about because the first team line, you have, left to right, Jack Nelson, Joe Brunner, Jake Renfro. We talked about snaps. Snaps look good, but Jake Renfro, he also looked good during a bowl game.
Yes, I did.
Joe Huber, and then you have Riley Mallman. Like that is in my eyes, a very good line. Brunner and Nelson are kind of the guys on the left side of the line that play with a little bit of attitude. Brunner's versatile. I'll say Huber is versatile. Renfro's, has looked good this spring. And then you have Mallman, also who, I think, him and Nelson could be one of the more experienced tackles that you'd want to have. And they've worked on their pass sets. I mean, AJ Blazek mentioned them to work on their pass sets too. And they've had to work against the outside linebackers all spring. So that's, iron sharpens irons, what they've, everyone's been preaching and during spring. So I think the first team line looks solid. I think I have a feeling that, if they stay healthy, they'll be able to run the ball well. I think it'll be a more balanced offense that way. Obviously, you saw what happened with the injuries to Ches Malusi, Tanner Mordecai, Braylon Allen not being 100%, and that really limited the effectiveness of what Wisconsin could do, especially with a young quarterback like Braden Locke last year as a redshirt freshman. But kind of going with the depth, with what I was saying, it's the second team line. I mean, you have two true freshmen in the spring working at the tackle spots, and one of them likely will not be a tackle at this level. And AJ Blazek mentioned that he felt Colin Culbertly, high 3-star recruit out of New York from your neck of the woods there, Bernie. He's played tackle in high school, but Blazek mentioned that he feels his skill set's more towards the interior, but he was needed at the right tackle spot. Now he played right tackle, guard, center throughout the spring with second, third team reps, during the spring. Kevin Haywood the highly touted, the highest rated signee of the 2024 class. Blazek thinks he's going to be special. He told us that, in the availability, they're trying to season him, as he put it. But he's still young too, but he looks the part. He's big. He'll continue to grow. He'll continue to grow, not necessarily physically, but I think strength and other things like that. But he already looks the part. But he's also young. And you saw at times, JP Benchwell was good. He's kind of working into first team reps as well. But outside of that, Barrett Nelson didn't practice and was off to the side during the spring. James Durant's still young. He's in his second year now with his second coach for Wisconsin, and he's still, they're all still learning. And at times you saw walk-ons with that second team, and nothing against walk-ons because obviously I wrote the book on the walk-on tradition, but they're still young too, and they're working through. These are young walk-ons too that are still trying to pick up the scheme, and so you do pick up
Leighton Nelson.
Leighton Nelson from Vanderbilt.
I was going to interject there. That's why you go out and get a Leighton Nelson. Now he was. Yeah. If Blazek was still at Vanderbilt, he was in line to start at right tackle for Vanderbilt this fall, or at least be in he was actually one of
conversation,
two at that position. And so I think that it's such a necessary addition because I don't think you can have true freshmen as both your tackle backups. That's just, we've seen Huber play tackle before a little bit, but it's definitely not his natural position. So I thought that was, it might not be a huge name or whatever in the transfer portal, but I think that's a huge addition for Wisconsin in the portal. And talking about the portal, there were, obviously the big addition on offense is quarterback, and that's Tyler Van Dyke. Tyler Van Dyke, from your reports, had an up and down spring. Kind of took him a second to really get up to speed. But when he did, what it sounds like to me is that he made some big plays that, other guys couldn't be able to make because of his physical stature and the arm strength that he has.
Yeah, this is a kid, I call him a kid, even though he's, he's got 1 more year.
Yeah.
And he's 6'4", 230-ish. And this is, again, it's a quarterback that, you go out there and who they had in the room coming back with Locke and Nick Evers, and then incoming with Mabry Matoyer. It's something that, we saw the jump that Locke made. But, Van Dyke, obviously, talk about, Luke Fickell's talk about competitive situations, playing to, kind of playing to the edge and competition, like any form of the word compete. I think Luke said during his availabilities. And so he's a player that, 2021 had a great season, and then injuries and other things and poor performances, in the last 2 years have hurt him, but this is a fresh start for Van Dyke, and he has the height. He can throw whatever pass you want. There's a little bit of struggle with accuracy for Van Dyke during the, first part in terms of the deep ball and getting used to the offense. I know Colton and I talked about it. Colton Bartholomew, my colleague at the Badger Extra, we talked about it on our podcast about how Wisconsin, it was like maybe 2 weeks in, 2.5 weeks in, we were like, if it was today, Braden Locke might have started. If the season would start that, it's because he's so used to it and like there's more consistency and whatnot. But then Van Dyke started turning it on. He was able to throw the deep ball with more accuracy. I talked about it before, but he was moving the ball up and down the field with the first and second team. That was really seen in the scrimmage. And I think the biggest thing that stood out, and I asked Luke about it too, was just the comfortability running the ball. Because we saw how effective Tanner Mordecai can be. And within this offense and within this running game, you absolutely need the quarterback to keep it, to call his number, especially on those RPOs at times. And, even with the quarterback draws or among other things, Mordecai was very, very effective, especially towards the end of the year, when he was healthy. And so I think that's going to be key for Wisconsin. That quarterback room is that he became more comfortable, and there are a couple of times I remember where, linebackers are crashing down on the backs. He keeps his number and he's picking up 15, 20 yards, 10 to 20 yards, something like that. And that's what you want to see. And, and like I said, Fickell joked about it, told us that he had joked with Van Dyke because when he looked at the 2021 film, he saw a little bit of that mobility, the agility there, and maybe not so much in 22 and 23. And so I think that's what Van Dyke will bring to this room. Now, like I said, Braden Locke looked very consistent in my eyes, protected the ball overall very well during the spring, made decisive, accurate, he looked really, to me, he looked smooth. And so, I mean, I asked Phil Longo because Phil Longo had said in, last month that outside of maybe 1 year at North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, he had said that he had never had to go to the head coach and then try to figure out who's going to be quarterback because they would declare themselves through their execution. That's nearly verbatim from what Phil said. So I asked Phil after the scrimmage, I'm like, so is it too early to do that? Because you said this. And he said to me, he said to all of us that were at that scrimmage, he's like, it's still too early. But hey, there's two competent quarterbacks, like I mentioned before. So I think, right now that quarterback room with Van Dyke, I mean, there's a lot of potential, I think, and also with the receiving targets and how they've matured over the course of the year, and also the emergence of Jake Kocorowski. So, I think, you have very much a two deep, a really good, of probably the deepest wide receiver room Wisconsin's seen in a while. They have to be with this type of offense that they run. And so I think Van Dyke's, plus with his maturity and having that starting experience, I feel like, Colton and I talked about it, I think we've talked about it before, where like we feel like maybe a half step ahead of Locke, but I mean, battle's not over. And so I think that's good news for Wisconsin fans, where they'll be able to, if you have two competent quarterbacks leading this offense, and they needed to last year with Mordecai's injury, the Wisconsin offense should be in good hands.
I was high on Braden Locke last year, and I'm still high on him. But again, you got a dude, Van Dyke's coming in to a whole new everything, and spring ball is not so much. It is I mean, obviously there's practice, but you're really trying to refine things and find people for fall camp. So you don't, Jake, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's not so much of a teaching. You only have 18 days. So it's not really like a teaching time. I mean, it is, but it isn't. Fall camp to me is a teaching time. You really all day, every day you're there, you're looking at film, you're practicing a bunch. You're just doing football for a month before that. But spring's different. Spring's 18 practices, 17?
15 practices.
So you have 15 practices. So they're not teaching, the X's and O's. You're really getting in there running. So that's why I think Braden Locke is a competent dude, because he's comfortable. And Van Dyke has to catch up. And it's not that easy, no matter if you're 25 or you're 20. But I love that we have two competent guys. And I feel like coming off of fall, I think Van Dyke pulls ahead, because I think his skill set at this point in his career is just a little more fine-tuned. That's my opinion of what fall camp he's going to start. He's going to be taught. He's going to go through the summer. I mean, he just got there. There's a lot going on in a young person's life, transferring and becoming, new to a team. And I still love Braden Locke, so don't take that any which way, because I loved when he got in, and I thought he played spectacular last year. But I want to know more about the running backs.
Of course.
Because who cares about the O-line? Who cares about the quarterbacks? Let's be real. Everything revolves around the running backs. Sadly, no more fullbacks. I'm okay with it. We had Ches on a couple weeks ago, and that guy says all the right things. Like, he really does. How's his progress been? He said he's doing well. He's a very humble dude, so he's not really going to tell us. But Jake, from your, how's that room look? I love, I'm blanking on people's names because I'm so tired. But I like Yakimelli. I like, who's the dude I'm really high on? Matt Perkins.
The dude you're
really high from Verona.
Jackson Aker.
Yeah, Jackson
Akers. Yeah. So I'm sorry, dude. Listen, I'm on like.
Oh no, it's all good. No, I hear you, man. It's all good. No, with running backs, like with Malusi, first off, his traps. Let's just talk about his traps. I've joked with them a couple of weeks ago about we had talked to the running backs in late April, and I was like, I went over to him at the last minute, and I said to him, I just put my phone up to him, so how did you get those traps? And everyone, he gave me some things to work on, because that's like the one thing besides my gut that I need to work on, and calves. Plenty of other things, but anyways, this is with Malusi. It's a kid that I call him a kid again. I'm 40, but 6th-year senior. And he did more than what we thought. I was talking to the guys at XM Sirius Radio yesterday, where Luke Fickle was at Wildy and Tosh on. ESPN Wisconsin didn't foresee him doing a lot during the spring. And then all of a sudden he's getting team reps. He's working that way. And I mean, he was taking hits and all this other stuff. And, he looked like a back that should be in Phil Longo's offense. And I think there's going to be a great 1-2 punch with him and Tawee Walker at the very least. The Oklahoma transfer where he showed a lot, during the spring where, he's a compact back. He's 5'9"-ish, 220 pounds, but he's explosive. He showed patience, on a cutback lane. I remember one play in particular where, he waited, there was a hole, but they waited for the cutback and he gained, 10, 15 yards. He's been useful out of the backfield in terms of catching the ball, which is obviously a big thing within Longo's offense too. And so they could be a great 1-2 punch with how they complement each other's skill sets. Now, talk about Aker and Yakimelli. Yakimelli, I thought had a really good spring, especially during the last parts of it. Ability to run, but also catch out of the backfield and get some yak, which is obviously, again, very important within this. I know yak to Yakimelli, right? Yak to yak, or whatever you want to call it. But he showed up really well as going into his third year, and Jackson Aker too. It was again, another player that if you're going to have someone like a fullback, it's going to be Aker because he played the position. So if you have a 2-back set, you could run him in if you run a pistol I formation type of look. Well, you guess who may be in front, along with maybe tight ends, obviously, because the fullbacks and tight ends have sometimes similar blocking responsibilities. But Aker ran the ball, I thought, well. I thought he could catch out of the backfield well too. And so right now it's a good problem for Wisconsin. You have 4 running backs that have game experience, and you can keep them fresh. And it's one thing where I know Isaac Guerendo left. I think I forgot when exactly he left, but imagine if they would have had Guerendo within this offense there. Yeah, and granted he had a great season at Louisville, especially that last half of the year, but. Him within this, I think Guerendo would have been perfect within this air raid offense, and in the running game. But that's neither here nor there. But when you have that depth, though, is what I'm trying to get at. You can do a lot, and you also have I'll mention Nate White. I thought at times he looked good too. It's a redshirt freshman from Milwaukee, Rufus King. I was high on him. Just from what he could do. And he was a kid that's not afraid of physicality. He's put on the weight that they wanted him to. And he made plays too during the spring. And so, we're not even talking about the 2 true freshmen that are coming in along with Gideon Atuka, who was the early enrollee at running back, where Darion Dupree and Dylan Jones, the 2 4-star signees running back for the 24 class, they can offer something else too, where, I think Dupree with that all-purpose back is different than I think anybody in that room, maybe outside of Yakimelli, and Walker. Walker's more compact at 220-ish pounds, but I think Dupree can do things in the slot that others maybe don't have that. That's not fitting their skill set. So it's a good problem to have right now with Wisconsin's running back room. It's just the amount of depth, but it's going to be interesting to see just who can find the field and who can help this offense. But they, at least in my eyes, have 4 players that have the experience, the game experience, and they'll be able to do something.
The depth is very much needed. Yeah. As you can tell from last season, we I'll tell you what, Jackson and Yakimelli, they took huge steps throughout the season last year from the beginning when they started playing to the bowl game. Yeah. Those dudes were night and day. I would say most improved players on the field, if there was an award for that as an upperclassman. And that's what's impressive to me. And now you add all these other guys, and you got Tywee and Ches is back. To me, that's very exciting. And I don't know if there's a problem seeing the field because injuries in this day and age happen a lot. People play less banged up than they used to, I think, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's a toughness thing. It's a good thing. You should not be playing banged up because your longevity in this sport is shortened.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think young guys they can play 4 games now. So I think we're going to see a lot of people at the beginning of the season outside of Alabama get in the game, get reps, see the field, and then they can figure out who's going to be who. But I'm excited that we have some studs, and then we have proven dudes who can do it now. Wait, Jake, a question before Matt Perkins jumps in.
Yes.
When you're standing on the field and offense is about to take, first team's in the huddle, second team's game, who's the leader out there? Who's getting guys pumped? Who's telling dudes like, let's get on our horse and let's go?
I actually didn't look that much on that. And I'll be honest, like I think just the entire. Maybe this speaks to the entire team, but I mean, the one thing that you saw, especially early on in practices, was the energy. Was just energy in general, where the guys are. It's not just one person. Where there's some kerfuffles, as I called it on radio hit yesterday with the Sirius XM guys, but there's a lot of energy. Like Joe Brunner is a guy that brings a lot of just a mauler type attitudes. Jack Nelson kind of, I don't even call them the Bash Brothers, like it wasn't if we were the Mighty Ducks fame for our age. But you have guys that, in my eye, I think there's an energy between everybody, and they know. I feel there's a little bit more hint of urgency, especially with the updated Big Ten schedule and just the opponents, and going to Southern Cal, hosting Alabama, Penn State, Oregon. You have to go to Iowa and Nebraska this year. And so that's going to be, I think the energy was up for everybody. So I don't think there was necessarily one person that needed to do that. I mean, there's plenty of guys that were stepping up where, a touchdown was thrown and everyone's all, Quincy Burrows makes that catch. I think it was the last offensive snap of the spring before they went to special teams last Thursday. But everyone just celebrate. Oh, everyone, makes a nice catch between defenders, and then everyone else goes nuts. So there's a lot of competition. So I don't think you really needed. I don't think there was one guy that always needed to continually pump them up. I think it's kind of a shared energy that everyone's been put out during the spring.
All right. So with that, we're talking depth. And I think that you mentioned before, we need to move to the defensive side of the ball. We're already 35 minutes in. We could talk offense all day. I love the wide receivers. But I think that's been pretty well covered. Like, they are deep. They are, it's crazy though, to me, the only receiver that was brought in under the Christ administration that's pretty much in the two deep is Vinny Anthony. And
real quick on him, one of the most versatile players in that receiver. I
love that kid, man. I was his high school tape was one of my favorites of the most recent years. I am excited to see him be the guy doing kick returns. I think he is, like, there was one of his clips. I've talked about this before, I'm sure, but one of his high school clips was him winning a game on a freaking kick return touchdown, like with no time remaining. And that just like juking dudes out of his, out of their jock straps left and right. And I'm really excited to see what he can do there. You mentioned the linebackers being deep. The opposite of that is the defensive line right now. And that has been, a big concern, I think, for a lot of people. James Thompson, really the guy returning is in terms of the leader in the room, but a lot of questions behind that. Jake, what should we be looking for at the defensive line? I mean, Elijah Hills came in from Albany. We'll see, how quickly he gets up to speed. You talked about the rise of Kurt Neal. But still, that's three guys. Ben Barton makes four. But I mean, how often they're going to be able to really go three down linemen? Because it feels to me like it's going to end up being a lot of like 2-4-5 kind of stuff.
I think it will be 2-4-5 just based off of the offenses that they'll be facing. Obviously, when it gets down to like the red zone, they'll probably go to a base 3-4. It's not going to be like what was underneath Jimmy, right? With where it was base 3-4 a lot and 2-4-5. They ran 2-4-5 a lot just because they had to with the spread type offenses, whether air raid or just a spread option type of offense. And so, I think they'll be able to rotate some guys. I mean, and Colton, I think, wrote about it too. I think that it's been kind of a pleasant surprise with just the defensive line in general, where they're able to engage and they're able to, I think in my eyes, they're able to engage and push with the linemen. And then they're also, they're not just, how do I put it? I think they're getting some pressure in the backfield. They're able to dictate some things more and more, in my eyes. And I think it's a good sign for Wisconsin's defensive line. Like James Thompson Jr. out, you mentioned it. He's the one that if there's an all big, Kurt Neal, I think could have a good year too. But I think James Thompson Jr. has that height and the height, the weight, and the athleticism that Wisconsin wants out of their defensive line. And Kurt Neal, obviously a little bit shorter, but he has the twitch and he has the athleticism to make plays. And you saw that in the ReliaQuest ball. And we also saw that when he was going up against the interior line during the spring at times. And so, those two will be called upon. Ben Barton's another kid that, a former offensive lineman, and then he switches over after 1 year, which, arguably, I think it's probably where he should have been, just because to start off his career, just because I remember watching a game he had where he was a good lineman, but I thought he played better on defense personally. That was back in 2019. And so you have, I think those three were getting a lot of the first team reps. You saw a little bit of Elijah Hills get, I think, a couple of first team reps for sure at one practice I saw after those guys. But it is, you're looking for the depth like Barton, Hills, who I think Mike Tressel called, he said some nice things after the scrimmage about him. Cade McDonald, who's into his fifth year too, and so in my eyes too, I think this group underneath EJ Whitlow, who's done amazing things at the group of 5 schools he's been at, like Miami of Ohio, most recently at Air Force. It's kind of I'm trying to think. I forgot which lineman, but he kind of said like an old school type mentality. One of the linemen said during availability, was it late last week? So I apologize for whiffing on the name. But I think one of them, I think Cade McDonald might have said that kind of reminded this, that Whitlow reminded him of sort of like Anoki Brechterfield, the old defensive line coach underneath Christ and whatnot. But I think they still have to figure out some things, and we'll see if they continue to look at the transfer portal, because they've brought in, JVR Suggs from Grand Valley State, and he released his top schools in Wisconsin's in there. He's got 2 years of eligibility. CJ West went to Indiana from the Kent State transfer. He announced that earlier this week. And so we'll see if they bring in anybody else to help shore up that line. I think Suggs at like 6'3", and I think, 6'3", 285 is what Grand Valley State had him at. I mean, that's some good size, and there's experience behind there. We'll see just what they can bring. But I think with what they have right now, I think they're playing stouter. I think there's more battles within, I hate calling it the trenches, but within that, that line of scrimmage, those 2 to 4 yards in front of and behind the line of scrimmage. I think they've held their own. I think that it's been they've had good battles. They haven't let up even with an experienced first team offensive line. I think it'll be interesting to see if they have anybody else, but we'll see if others can step up too.
You got to shore up that D line. I am the biggest hater of the 2 down linemen. That's what the 2-4-5 means, if anyone's listening. I literally hate that. I think you are asking to get the ball ran all over you, and it's proven that even Jimmy's defense, it didn't work. I would remember texting Matt Perkins 3 years ago going, I hate seeing these 2 down linemen. We're getting torched because you just don't have the stout dudes up there. And if a lineman comes free, Jake, big dudes get into the second level. Always bad things happen when those guys get up there. Listen, I know we're running out of time, so I know we could talk all day about the linebackers, which seems to be the best group on the defensive side, which makes me happy because I agree with you. The guys we had before, who I thought were great football players, weren't the same guys that we needed in this specific defense. They were 3-4 guys. We're in a 3-3. People don't get it. It is wildly different. Like almost every responsibility is wildly different. It does not match up to the 4-3 or the 5-2, which some of us old geezers played in high school. Even the 3-4 is a little wacky, but the 3-3 is so completely out of right field.
Right. I mean, I think
let's talk about the DBs.
Sure.
Oh, no, so we can talk about the 3-3 scheme in general, but I don't want to blow anyone's mind on boring X's and O's. But the DBs, these dudes are going to be asked to do a lot, and they were asked to do a lot last year. And I'm interested about the battle between our best. To me, I do think our best group on offense is the wide receivers against maybe our best group from last year of the DBs. And I'm excited to hear what that battle was like and who stepped up and what the DB the DB room looks like, because you got some leaders in there and you got some dudes who are really awesome.
Right.
But we're going to need those guys big time.
Yeah, especially with Alabama, with Kalen, what he's bringing. Because hey, Alabama's offense is really good. Well, guess who they're bringing? They're bringing the offense that Michael Penix just aired it out, and they have they have a great quarterback for Alabama coming back too. So, and all that 5-star talent. But you have with let's start with Wisconsin's cornerbacks. Obviously with safety you have Hunter Wooler. So first and foremost, Hunter Wooler. All Big Ten performer. Don't see that changing. We'll see how they use him throughout the season. And if they do the dollar, how he roams around the field, well, that's going to be a key to see where I don't know if he flowed around the ball throughout the spring too, as well. But going to cornerbacks, Nazir Fortune, I thought took a huge leap from last year. He's playing very well. He played very well, had a couple interceptions in back-to-back practices. Kid that, obviously a Division II transfer, and he was asked to do a lot last year. And you saw him start to shine more, more and more this spring. He looks fitter. Obviously when you get into Brady Collins' strength and conditioning program, we've seen the results so far, especially with Fortune. You've seen he's stronger, faster in my eyes, and I thought he held up really well. Didn't see a lot of Ricardo Hallman because obviously he's coming back from procedure on his shoulder, but that allowed guys like Jonas DeClona, who I thought looked pretty good. Him and RJ Delancey III, the Toledo transfer, worked on the outside spots. Delancey towards the end got first team reps there. And so I think those, guys on the defensive side, I would say they stood out there. Nickel, it's going to be interesting to see just with matchups because you have Austin Brown, who played the nickel in the ReliaQuest Bowl, bigger body, another presence up front where we talk about the running game before where, you think about it, if you have to run that 2-4-5, well, think of him as another extra linebacker as a safety up in the slot. When it comes to coverage, maybe you have Max Lofi, who really I thought had a really good spring too, where he got first and second team reps there in the slot. I think with safety, Hunter Wooler's Hunter Wooler. With the injuries to Kamoy Latu and Preston Zachman, you saw guys like, Brown would work back at a safety role, but then you also brought in Braden Moore, who another 4-star defensive back with 2023 signee, physically looks the part, and now it's him just getting used to it, working underneath Alex Grinch. I think he could be a rotational player too. So there's depth. There's depth that, you remember when we talked about, kind of Wisconsin underneath Paul Chris, it's like, okay, a lineman, running backs, linebackers, depth, right? But now you're looking at like underneath Fickle early on, hey, wide receivers are deep. What? And then you have defensive backs and safeties that are deep too. And there's length and again, buzzwords, length and athleticism. You have guys that, that can play and they need to play. They need to have depth because you can't have Ricardo Hallman or Fortune play as many reps as they did last year. And so I also think, DeClone along with Jace Arnold, where I feel bad where, I thought he had a good spring, but there are also times where there'd be one play per practice where he get beat on something and it was noticeable, but it's also just, it's like an offensive tackle. You run 70 plays. Okay, great. You give up one sack. People are like, oh, he gives up one sack again. I'm like, yeah, but that's he's still 98% good. He's effective that way. So it's, so I think they're deep, and I think who they're bringing in too for the defensive backfield, when it comes to Emilio Agard, who's a 4-star kid who played in the All-American Bowl, you have Jay Harper, Xavier Lucas. We're recording on what? Can we disclose what day we're
yes, it's Thursday, and he ran a 10.49 in the 100 at 6'2".
At 6'2", 6'1", 6'2", and 100, under 200 pounds, whatever. But this is a kid that, they wanted length at cornerback. They have it. They have speed. That's what they're looking for, not just in 24 class in the transfer portal, but also 25 class and beyond. And that speed, I have an article that'll be going out for Badger Extra at some point in the coming days where takeaways from the spring, they've added speed to their 25 recruiting class, but it started before that. And you can see it with Xavier Lucas. So, the future, I think, is right with that defensive cornerback room. There were battles. Fortune versus CJ Williams is the one where like Van Dyke threw up a contested ball and Fortune came down with a great interception. It was great coverage by him, and Williams, I thought CJ Williams had a pretty good camp too, both first and second team offenses. And so, but it's one of those things which you're seeing it within the offense. They're going back and forth. They're fighting each other. There's, in terms of not actually fighting, but they're going up and battling against one another on, out in the field. And that's what you want to see from both your offense and defense.
You got to hope that the defensive snap count is down this year. I mean, literally, they played so much more snaps than the offense, I think. And that is where you get dudes. That's why you need depth in that room, because these guys are going to be exhausted. Or on the other end, you need more wide receivers and you need more running backs, because I'm hoping the snap count for offense is up. Because It was not up. A lot of 3 and outs, and you're putting our defense on the field so much more. And dudes get tired, and you get mentally tired. You talked about missing 1 rep. If you're on the field for 70, 80 plays, that's a lot of plays. That's probably more than what a football game would be. But you're talking about, if you make 1 mistake, you could get burnt. Imagine that. If one mistake out of 50 plays is way different than 1 out of 70.
Right.
So you're under the sun. It's hot. There's a lot of pressure. A lot's going on. You got to stay sharp the whole game. It's not easy when you're playing and you're exhausted.
Yeah, and on top of that, by the way, too, Amari Snowden actually stepped up too with the second team reps, started getting more reps, and I thought he's an intriguing guy at 6'4". And so if he can continue his progression, it's the second year, right, and continue to develop his body, and then also work as a very big cornerback, I think maybe a name to watch. This fall for sure, and then also, of course, next year. When you have someone like Ricardo Hallman, who could possibly declare for the NFL draft. Then you have Delancey, who's in his I think it's his final year, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But you also have in Fortune, I think, is a redshirt senior too right now. So it's the only younger guys to step up. I think they're in good hands right now. And so, I mean, obviously we'll see. But I think going back to your snap counts real quick, I think that goes back to also the pressure and getting the pressure. And that's where the linebackers and the defensive linemen too. But I think you're going to see those off the edge with Pius, with Peterson, with Lowry, and then even Jaheim Thomas, who can be used in the middle, but he can also go off and work on the edge in certain packages. He's a pass rushing presence too. And then you have Jake Chaney, just a bulldozer running up the middle, which we've again saw this spring. So it's I think that's going to be key to getting those guys off the field.
So final question from me, at least, heading into the summer, what's the one biggest question that you have for the team, or the one biggest thing that you need to see answered in fall camp?
I mean, in fall camp, I mean, the one question that I need to be answered for the season is going to be, I don't think I'll be able to see it during fall camp. It's just going to be like, can they close out the game? They've all talked about like what happened in the fourth quarter, but like against Indiana last year, they had a chance to win. If if there's one fourth quarter throw that's made, I argue that they win the game. But you have with Wisconsin, I think it's going to be that mentality that I don't know if we'll be able to see during fall camp again, just because you're going team versus team, it's teammates against teammates. But can they get through a rough game, call it a dogfight, whatever you want to call it, come out with a win? And that's going to be, and that's what you want to see. Can they close out in the fourth quarter and put a team away, or pull one out when they shouldn't? I think one thing during fall camp is just the continued progression of just how this team continues to take the identity of their coach. This is a team that, talk about competitiveness. I mean, that compete, play to the edge, especially during fall camp. You know how it is, Bernie. It's a team that, that's a grueling August phase. Will energy keep up or go down? I think I know the answer just based off of what we've seen in the spring, but spring is different, like you mentioned, where you have a day off. You can go back, look at your, absorb like a sponge, and then, what we did right and wrong. And then you go back out and learn the new stuff. So I think with this team in fall camp, I think the one thing is just, maybe I'll say this, staying healthy. Just can they stay healthy enough, especially in the offensive line? And can they find someone more depth on the offensive line with a Leighton Nelson, with those true freshman offensive linemen coming in? Can they shore up the two deep there? Because even with like AJ Blas, like he mentioned right now during the spring, it was a couple weeks ago where he said they feel they can move out Joe Brunner or Joe Huber to the tackle spot if they needed to while they're seasoning Haywood. We saw that with Brunner moving out to left tackle and then JP Benchwall going in at left guard with first team reps during the spring when Nelson wasn't taking them. But can they shore up the depth and can they stay healthy? Because if the line stays healthy, I think they're and the running backs stay healthy. I know there's more depth, but if you have Malusi stay healthy, Walker stay healthy, I think that's going to really change the dynamics of the offense within a more experienced wide receiver room. And then on the other side too, just health with linebackers and, within the defensive backfield too, where making sure you have guys like Zachman and Hallman back too, who, made some plays last year.
I think one of the biggest things, and Jake, you mentioned a little bit, but to me, it's all those things. Yes, everything you mentioned, dude. I don't like moving linemen around because when you season dudes in that spot, and I give you two examples, Jason Palermo and Matt Lawrence, when I played, these guys were guards. They never now played guard. They never went to tackle. And as fifth-year seniors, when they were asked to go in behind Dan Benning and Clinkscale, these guys were ready and they were refined and they waited 4 years and they played 1 year. And they knew what to do and they were ready to do it. And I like that for linemen. Going out to tackle is a much different position.
Yeah.
I won't stand at my pillbox on this one, but I think to me, one of the most important things on defense, you got Hunter Waller. That dude is a beast, and he is the leader of that side of the ball. Everyone knows it. He's probably the leader of the team. You know it. You need 2 or 3 more leaders. I don't care. They need to be vocal. They need to be in people's face when times are needed. As we met, as you said, the last 2 minutes or 4 minutes really of the bowl game it's like we built up this beautiful building and the foundation, it just crumbled at the end. And we can't do that. We could have won that game. Like, that's one of the best football games we played there last year, and we should have won. And we had penalties. It's just like guys stopped playing football. It's like we forgot how to do it. So I'm looking for some dude to say, like a Brandon Williams on offense, who would get fired up over anything or nothing. Like coin flip, he'd be excited about, and get dudes ready to go. Dante Sanders, getting dudes ready, no matter what the circumstances, no matter how you feel. These guys were in your face and they were ready to go, and they got you pumped. Dude, there are always going to be guys like Brooks Bollinger, who is the silent leader, the guy who gets in the huddle. He's like, all right, guys, let's go score, right? You trust Brooks, you love him. But there has to be somebody else there who's like, yo, let's do this too. Come on, guys, like getting people excited about it. So I'm looking for that. Like, I think Chez is that dude. He's not so vocal, which he actually said, but I think he could be that guy, right? You have some wide receivers who can be that guy. I don't think Braden Locke's going to be that guy. He's a quiet dude. He's like a John Stocco. He's going to come in and be like, all right, guys, let's go score a touchdown. So who's the next guy? Donovan Raiola. Dude, if you made a mistake, Donovan Raiola would tell you to your face in the huddle.
Oh, I believe it.
So, like, I don't know if I really need to be called out in the huddle. But when you trust dudes around you, that constructive criticism actually works.
Yeah.
So,
right.
So I'm looking.
I think
for
Jake Chaney is one of
those.
I think Jake Chaney is one of those guys. One of the, like you mentioned right off the bat, like, he can be a fiery guy going into his 4th year. He's a true senior. I know that my editors don't like me using the word true when it comes to true freshman or true junior, but he's a 4-year player. You don't see a lot of that anymore, where usually there's a red shirt. Especially now with the transfer portal, where guys, maybe wait and they want to go in and you're like, oh, guys, he's still got X amount of years of eligibility. Jake's been playing since his freshman year. Same thing with Wohler. And so I think Chaney's one of those guys that can do it. I'm seeing, I know at wide receiver, Will Pauling, Kenny Guyton, the wide receivers coach, talked about him trying to be more of a leader too, and how he's done stuff within the wide receiver room and whatnot. So I think Pauling could, would step up with his leadership. So I think, within each position group, you'll have guys like that, like tight end, Riley Nowakowski's kind of that he joked about. I don't know if he joked about it or a reporter joked about him being the old guy in the room. And he's a 5th-year senior now. But each guy's within their position group, they're going to have their leaders. But yeah, talking about team leaders, It'll be interesting to see, just like, Jack Nelson was supposed to be one of the, off-season captains too. A guy that, is he lead by example or is he more vocal? We'll see coming up. But I think
you always have leaders in the groups.
Right.
Like, you're always going to have somebody in each group. It's the guy who, like Lee Evans was a leader in the group, but he was not a vocal dude. But you had Brandon Williams, who was overly vocal, so no one else had to say anything, and that's a good thing, right? Like, nobody needed to say anything. But I think it's the dudes. Listen, I agree. There's a bunch of leaders on the team, but it's who's going to be the top dog, I guess, to be the leader, to get all the other leaders, rallied behind something, to give confidence to people when they need it, to slap them on the tush when they need that also. Like, those are things that I think are important, and you gotta have those. You gotta have some vocal dudes in a positive way to get people going. And at least on the offensive side, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for all these other things you're mentioning too, obviously. But that to me, gets a team. You become a team when somebody screams at you in your face and you go out there and do something about it. And it's not your coach. Coaches can do that to a certain level, and then they're not on the field with you, so they can't do it. Like, that's not the person. You need one of these dudes. You need a quarterback. You need it. It can be anybody from any position. To be honest, it doesn't have to be the QB or running back. But I think there are a bunch of guys who can be that guy, and I think fall camp. I think people are going to be groomed to take that over, and I think. I'm just hoping it's Ches, but these guys aren't. I don't want them to expand out of their comfort zones. Brandon Williams was not scared to scream and chat, clap and get in people's faces and just say whatever he thought. That was the way he operated. I loved it because you kept, you start laughing, but then then the practice becomes fun, and you're like, I got to follow this dude's lead. I can't be left behind. So, like, all these things, I just think, it just brings like a whole different dynamic to football.
Right. No, I think, like you mentioned, you need guys like a Chris Orr or a Brandon Williams. I think Chris Orr example is try an example of who you're talking about. It also takes a special type of player to be that. And not special in terms of like up a level, but just a certain type of personality, a certain type of willingness to put themselves out there, and also fit their personality and whatnot. So that's gonna be one thing to watch too. Is just how that fires out. Who's the emotional leader of the team in terms of providing that if they need that energy, who's going to provide it, especially late in the game.
Jake, you are always providing the energy when you come on the podcast. We appreciate you stopping by like we do every single time. I'm sure we'll be having you back again very soon. We want to thank everyone tuning in to Believe in Badgers here on the Believe Network, presented by BetOnline.ag and Oak Bridge Wealth Management. Make sure you're following Jake on all of the social medias, subscribing to Badger Extra to get his exclusive content and much more. He's the man. That's really what it boils down to, is Jake is the man. We appreciate him taking the time with us here today. And until next time, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.